Trump grows increasingly frustrated as missile strikes and drone attacks continue, Kremlin likely pressuring Russia's central bank over war-related inflation, and why Trump's Ukraine minerals deal has major flaw. The latest news next. Over the past few weeks, Ukraine and Russia have agreed at least to a partial ceasefire, yet missile strikes and drone attacks continue. This in turn frustrates US President Donald Trump, The Telegraph reports. Today, another round of talks between the US and Russia will take place in Saudi Arabia. A day earlier, Trump's special envoy stated that Washington is optimistic that this meeting could pave the way for a full ceasefire. However, the Kremlin downplayed expectations, saying that the meeting is just beginning, difficult negotiations are expected, and the parties are only at the beginning of this path. In particular, Kremlin spokesperson Dmitry Peskov's warning came less than a week after Russia rejected Trump's proposal for a full 30-day ceasefire, agreeing only to a partial one. Ukraine and Europe have expressed concern that Russia is delaying to buy time on the battlefield, which is likely to frustrate Trump, who promised to end the war quickly. Sources close to the US president indicated on Sunday that Trump is willing to wait for a favorable deal. However, some said that the White House chief is increasingly frustrated by the missile and drone attacks that continue despite both sides promised to implement a partial truce. Quote, he, Trump, will be disappointed if they, Ukraine and Russia, continue bombing infrastructure facilities and energy, said a source close to the administration. People close to the president say that the White House remains calm and that it is necessary to trust the process. US President Donald Trump has made it clear that he is open to supplying Ukraine with more weapons in exchange for access to the country's mineral resources. But putting the plan into practice may not be so easy, the Wall Street Journal reports. Many of the minerals of greatest interest to the United States are located in areas occupied by Russia or threatened by Moscow's offensive. As a result, access to Ukraine's valuable natural resources will depend, at least in part, on the battle for eastern Ukraine, where Russian forces are currently advancing slowly but surely. Although deposits of rare earth metals have been discovered in several parts of Ukraine, the largest known deposit is located near the front line in eastern Ukraine, the Wall Street Journal writes. Experts have expressed skepticism that some of Ukrainian minerals, including rare earth metals, could be mined anytime soon. Wolf Christian Paes of the International Institute for Strategic Studies stated that the biggest drawback of the plan was the most of the reserves were located in areas of Ukraine under Russian control or very close to the front line, meaning that no one would be able to extract and process the materials. He added that these assets would be difficult to access without a lasting peace in Ukraine, and that a ceasefire would not be enough. In addition, rare earth metals are very expensive to mine, and the known deposits in Ukraine are much smaller than in the United States, added George Engel, price analyst at Benchmark Minerals Intelligence. Ukraine-US agreement. The Ukrainian government has approved the text of a framework agreement on the creation of a joint investment fund to which revenues from Ukrainian natural resources will be transferred. The Cabinet of Ministers authorized the first Deputy Prime Minister, Minister of Economy Yulia Sviridenko, or Minister of Foreign Affairs Andriy Sybiga to sign the agreement. The agreement was to be signed during President Zelensky's visit to the United States on February 28. However, his meeting with US President Donald Trump ended in a scandal, after which Zelensky left the White House without a signed agreement. Analysts at the Institute for the Study of War have suggested that the Kremlin is exerting pressure on Russia's central bank over high interest rates to curb inflation driven by its war against Ukraine, reported by ISW. About details, ISW noted that according to unconfirmed reports, tensions have arisen between Russian Central Bank Governor Elvira Nabiullina and the Kremlin over high interest rates and monetary policy during the war. On the 23rd of March, a Russian insider source reported that the Federation Council's Accounts Chamber, Russia's highest audit body had recently launched an audit of the Central Bank of Russia. The audit aims to assess the bank's monetary policy from 2022 to 2024 and the impact of interest rates on inflation, budget spending, and investment. The source claimed that the investigation was effectively an attack on Nabiullina, adding that a group of lobbyists from large Russian businesses is pushing for a lower interest rate. ISW cannot independently verify this insider source's claim and has not observed other reporting about the alleged audit, ISW analysts added. However, the analysts did note that Russia's inflation is rising due to its full-scale invasion of Ukraine. In December 2024, the Russian central bank decided to keep the key interest rate at 21%, the highest since 2003, in an effort to curb inflation.
The Russian central bank's interest rate through 2025 has remained relatively conservative despite significant and growing inflationary pressures. The Kremlin has claimed in recent months that the inflation rate is about 9 to 10%, but these figures are likely far below the actual inflation rate, which is likely closer to 20 to 25%. Russia's current interest rate should likely be higher, and the Kremlin likely pressured the central bank to keep the rate at 21% when the central bank should have increased it to curb inflation.
About details, analysts suggest that Russian dictator Vladimir Putin has also attempted to shift the blame for rising inflation onto the central bank, specifically targeting Nabiullina.
The audit on the central bank may be part of the Kremlin's ongoing efforts to apply political pressure on the bank to prevent further interest rate hikes beyond the current rate of 21%, manage the expectations and frustrations of the Russian business community, and further the Kremlin's narrative about Russia's economic stability. The Kremlin's continued manipulation of the central bank's decisions is likely hampering the Russian government's ability to enact sound wartime monetary policies.
Moscow sees economic and geopolitical benefits in pandering to US President Donald Trump's desire for a ceasefire in Ukraine. But the Kremlin's military goals have not changed, the New York Times reports. As noted in the agency, Trump said that he is focused on stopping the death march in Ukraine as soon as possible. However, for Vladimir Putin, the ceasefire talks with Trump are a means to a much broader end. Russian and American officials are set to meet in Saudi Arabia on March 24th to continue negotiations on the technical details of a partial ceasefire to end attacks on energy facilities and ships in the Black Sea. While Ukraine says it is ready for a full ceasefire, Putin has made it clear that he will first seek a wide range of concessions. As a result, the Kremlin seems determined to squeeze as much benefit as possible out of Trump's desire to conclude a peace deal with Ukraine, even if he is slowing down the negotiations. From Moscow's point of view, improved relations with Washington are an economic and geopolitical boon, one that can be achieved even if Russian missiles continue to fire at Ukraine, according to the New York Times. Putin's goal interviews last week with senior Russian foreign policy officials at a security conference in New Delhi revealed that the Kremlin views the Ukraine talks and US-Russia ties as going in two separate directions. Putin continues to seek a far-reaching victory in Ukraine, but is pondering to Trump's desire for a ceasefire to take advantage of a thaw with Washington, the New York Times writes. Vyacheslav Nikonov, deputy chairman of the lower house of the Russian parliament's International Affairs Committee, said that Trump and Putin are developing a bilateral agenda that's not connected to Ukraine.